Good morning, everyone. Good to be here. Uh, from Proverbs 19:11, let's just jump right in. Good sense makes one slow to anger, and it is his glory to overlook an offense. In a lot of ways, this is kind of part two of a sermon that I gave last time I was in front of you, talking about forgiveness, talking about the challenges that I had when my parents went through a divorce and the relationship struggles that I had with my father, and how Scripture guided me, reminded me that if I don't forgive Dad, if I don't share the gift that was shared with me through the shedding of Christ's blood, I'll lose that gift. And so I had to figure out, okay, how do I forgive Dad? But along with that was this idea of I had a grudge against my father. And one of the things that I want us to think about today is it takes work to hold a grudge. And we'll talk about that. But notice this too, good sense. Good sense makes one slow to anger. And so as I thought about that, what was the description as a description of me as I struggled with my love for my father, or any time that I've had a grudge or struggled with forgiveness towards anybody? According to this passage, did I represent good sense? Absolutely not. Because it's out of that good sense. And I think a good understanding of what that means here, when you think about, well, what good sense? Well, it's about following God, isn't it? It's about following his teaching, the teaching of his son, the teaching of Scripture, what we read in the Bible. That's what I think clearly defines good sense. And when you have that, it's going to lead you in good directions, if you will. So this question popped in my head as I was preparing this lesson. Do you ever rent space out in your head? I don't know if you've ever came across that statement. I remember the show, The Big Bang Theory. I remember hearing it in an episode of that show when Sheldon was struggling with one of the other characters. He was holding a grudge for something that happened years ago, and the gentleman said, yeah, and I'm living right there, rent-free. You know, and you think about that when you're struggling in a relationship with somebody else because you're harboring bitterness. Whatever that is, you're holding a grudge. You spend a lot of time thinking about that person, thinking about that situation. And unfortunately, this is an example when it's not positive. And that's what I mean by you're renting space out in their head. It really is a control matter. Now, sometimes that can be a positive thing too. Think about that time you first fell in love, with your spouse, and you spent a lot of time thinking about them. Well, that's a very positive kind of thing, but that's not what we're talking about here. Like I said, it really is about giving up control to others. And that's usually never a good idea, unless, of course, it's the Lord. But taking offense allows others to dictate your emotions and thereby the quality of your life. Literally, we're giving them control. And if this whole idea of being unforgiving, this whole idea of holding a grudge is negative, we are allowing ourselves to be negatively influenced by something that's negative. Now, does that sound like a godly thing to do to you? Well, of course not. Of course not. When we allow the expressions of brokenness in others to affect us, we take our minds off the ways of heaven and place them on the ways of the world. Well, let's process that a little bit. We need to understand that those things that happen in life that cause us to hold a grudge, again, they're not positive. And the idea of this statement is that these things that are said to us or these things that are done to us do not come from a holy place. They do not come from a holy person. And so when you hold on to that grudge, you are giving something unholy real estate in your thinking, in your person. And when you think about it that way, it might be motivating to us to do something about it. I can remember for years and years when my mom was still alive and talking to her on the phone, and it seemed like we were talking about my brothers a lot. Of course, I was the favorite one. I mean, that goes without saying. We know that. But I always appreciated Mom as we talked about spiritual things and in the context of my brothers and their families, that Mom realized that there's just a lot about spiritual things that they don't understand. And we know that, right? As one of the blessings of being a child of God, one of the blessings of being baptized into the gospel is it comes with the ability to understand spiritual things in a way that we could never understand them before without the Spirit. And my mom was always sensitive to this idea that my brothers didn't have that, if you will, that extra layer that allows us to connect and understand with godly things and with God himself. And my point simply is we need to realize that when people lash out at us or do or say those things that cause problems for us, that is coming from an unholy place. So why do we want to give unholy things any control in our lives in any way, shape, or form? The problem with giving up that control as well is it keeps us from obedience. Dave talked about this passage in our class this morning. Let's revisit it again. From Matthew 22, beginning at verse 37, it says, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the great and first commandment." Remember, he's responding to the question, what is the greatest commandment? Verse 38, "This is the great and the first commandment. And the second is like it, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. And on those two commandments depend all the law and the prophets." So how do you do with following that in your life? When you're harboring bitterness, when you're unwilling to forgive somebody, when you're holding a grudge, how do you do at fulfilling that? I think it's pretty clear to us that when we look at a passage like this, it includes everyone. Not just about our immediate family. It's not just about, the church family. It's about everybody. Everybody. Realize how important that topic of love is in regards to opening the door in somebody's life to the gospel. And when we are willing to harbor anything that's bitter, we shut down that invitation. We shut down that opportunity to reflect that to a world that needs it most of all, that love, that forgiveness, that grace that we've experienced, that put us in the relationship that we have with God. So think about it this way. Who is really in control when we hold a grudge? I hope I've already made this point quite clear, is that we are not in control, at least godly control, when we're the ones harboring that bitterness, that grudge, when we're the ones that are unwilling to extend this amazing gift of forgiveness and grace that we've gotten to others. And might I remind you, that wasn't a gift that we earned, was it? For you can't earn it. But how often we require others to earn it. Oh my. Have you ever demanded that somebody apologize to you? Let's think about that. As soon as you demand others to apologize to you, you're holding them to a standard that you don't hold yourself to. We'll talk more about that in a minute as well. But think about it this way. Think about that phrase, hold a grudge. Hold a grudge. What kind of word is hold? It's a verb. Okay? It's a verb. In other words, it's a description of doing something. So grab something and hold it. If you're not already, just grab something and hold it. Just hold it. We're going to do an experiment. You just hold it for a while, okay? Do whatever you have to do to hold it, but just hold it for a while. But I want you to think about that idea of holding a grudge. You have to work at it. There's something you have to do to keep it going. That's what that means about holding a grudge. Just like holding this Bible, I'm making an effort to hold on to it, to secure it, if you will, to keep it from falling. Okay? And if I stood here like this a while, you know what would happen. Pretty soon I have to be going like this, or I just want to put it down, which might be the best thing at all, because if I put it down, I'm no longer what? See how simple it is? If you just put it down, you're no longer holding it. In our thinking, is our thinking in line with God? Here's something else to think about. Maybe you're struggling with something and you don't even realize that that's the problem. That you are holding on to something that offended you, maybe you don't even realize that you got some forgiving to do. You've got some letting go to do, and you don't even realize it. So consider your self-talk. And we all do this. We all talk to ourselves, aren't we? I mean, some of you are doing it right now. It's like, how long is he going to go? Right? Oh, you thought about it. I know you did. Because we always do. You peek at the clock and go, okay, we're all right now, but another 10, 12 minutes, maybe not. We'll see. Go on, Rudy. Quit trying to make that point. But consider your self-talk. Is it negative or positive in regards to that person or that incident or that thing? If it's negative, it's a pretty good indication then that you might have a problem that you need to deal with. It may be a good indication, in fact, it is a great indication that you are holding a grudge, that maybe you need to forgive someone. Along with considering your self-talk, reflect on the conversations that you may be having with others concerning the grudge. Does it make it worse or better? It might be worse. Sometimes it's healthy to talk things out, to process things, okay? But if it's just gossip, if it's just like, can you believe what happened now? Kind of conversations, then it's probably how you are holding the grudge as opposed to letting it go, okay? So again, reflect on that conversation. It could be positive or negative. It's really based on your mindset. Because sometimes we think we have the right to hold a grudge, right? Oh, I justified it with my father. How could he do that to my mother? How could he do that to our family? Oh, I had a list of things to justify my unholiness. Sometimes it's hard to confess that. But that's what it was. That's exactly what it was. In other words, another way to think about it, was I representing God's truth? God's forgiveness? God's call to service for me? Absolutely not. It's a choice we make. And that's a powerful statement to think about. Because if it's a choice that you've made to hold the grudge, it means you have the ability to do something about it. That's the good news here. I hear this a lot with kids. As an elementary school principal, I hear this a lot. I heard it with my kids. I've heard it from my wife. You make me so mad. The reality is nobody makes you mad. We make decisions about what upsets us and what doesn't. Now, it's not that we sit down consciously and write out what they are, but just in the course of thinking and experiences, we decide what makes us mad and what doesn't. We really do. Don't dismiss that, because as soon as you dismiss that, you also throw away your ability to do something about it. The simple point is, it's a choice. What's the choice that you're going to make? This kind of reflects a conversation that I'll have with elementary students when they come to my office, all upset about something that happened. You know, they come in from recess and he called me an idiot. He called me an idiot. Oh, he makes me so mad. And, you know, I'll say things to them like, well, are you an idiot? Well, no, I'm not an idiot. Then why are you so upset? Well, he called me an idiot. But you're not an idiot, right? What if he would have called you a chair? And, you know, I'm trying to make a ridiculous point here. What do you mean, Mr. Hammer? Well, what if he just said, you're such a chair, as opposed to calling you an idiot? Oh, Mr. Hammer, that's just kind of dumb. I'm not a chair. Oh, that's my point. You're not an idiot either. But you got all upset about that, and you didn't get upset about this. Why? Well, it's a choice you made. Now, I realize those are extremes, but I think it's a great place to start thinking about that reality, okay? What is it that I'm going to let upset me, and what is it that I'm just going to ignore, okay? I do want to say this too. Every time that I've talked about this topic of forgiveness and now holding a grudge and things like that, I realize there are times to be mad and even times to avoid people. I remember once I was really changed. When I was a student at Abilene Christian University, I got the privilege of sitting in the classroom of people like Carl Burkeen and Paul Faulkner. How many of you remember those names? Yeah, all the old people in here. You know, those guys, well, it's true. It's true, and these guys know that. But you know, they were the voice, the teaching in the churches of Christ in the United States and really around the world when it came to marriage and family. And I remember sitting in Paul Faulkner's class one day and talking and making this point. You know, and these guys are all about holding families together. But he even made the point. He said, you know, I've counseled women before. If they're in an abusive relationship where, especially if it's physical abuse, he said, I counsel them to get out of that relationship. And, you know, those hardliners in the church, you know, kind of struggle with that idea. But that statement really resonated with me, and it just caused me to think about some things and kind of making this point. Yeah, there's some people out there you need to avoid. There's some people that maybe you're in a relationship right now that relationship maybe needs to come to an end if you're struggling with it. And I just want to acknowledge that. I just want to acknowledge that. It isn't enough sometimes to just let go of the grudge or to honestly work at forgiving somebody. Sometimes you just need to avoid. Well, let me say it this way. There are some idiots out there. Just don't be one of them. Just don't be one of them. Even though my opinion says there might be some relationships you need to bring to an end. Some people you need to avoid. And when I say avoid, maybe never talk to or see again in your life, okay? But there are never times to stop believing, hoping, and praying that God's love can change a person. And when we hold a grudge, we don't pray that prayer. when we harbor bitterness, when we're unwilling to forgive others, we don't pray that prayer. And if you remember some of the things that I shared in regards to how I overcame the grudges that I was holding against my own father that caused me to be unwilling to forgive him, one of the things, remember what I said, I just had to do it because God said to do it. And honestly, I had to fake it until it was real. And one of the things that was a huge part of that was praying for my father. Are you struggling with somebody that you can't forgive right now? Somebody you're holding a grudge with? Start praying for them. And I mean sincerely, honestly praying for them. Now, those might be short prayers. I get that. They might be real short. You know, it might be, God, please bless so-and-so. That dirty, no, can't say it like that. But you might feel that way. But pray it and keep praying it. Why? Because it will soften your heart. And it will get to a point where it's real, where you're not faking it anymore. That's how God can change us. Another thing, too, and I've talked about this before, though, too, is when we're holding a grudge, and notice how I let go of that? Notice how I just let go of that? Did you let go of yours yet? Is anybody still holding on? This idea of standards. Why do we hold others to standards we don't hold ourselves to? And I realized I was doing that to my father. And I think if you'll be honest, if you're holding a grudge against somebody, if you are in a point where you just despise somebody, you are holding them to standards that you don't hold yourselves to, whether you realize that or not. And that's why I say that. I need you to think about that. I need you to think about that. You know, it's like running a race against somebody, but you have different finishing lines. It's not fair. It's not fair. And God has a problem with us receiving a gift, especially a gift he's commanded that we share with others. God has a problem when we don't do that. So much so, you could lose the gift yourself. And that's a pretty powerful statement. So let me ask you, who in this world is it worth hating so much that you lose your own salvation? Who's worth that? Who? Exactly. Their name is no one. Nobody. Ecclesiastes 7:21. What I like about this too is, you know, we started out in Proverbs. Now we're looking at this passage in Ecclesiastes that says much the same as the passage we started with this morning. Which kind of says to me, rooted in the Old Testament, this is something man has struggled with a long time. And it's still pretty good advice for us. Ecclesiastes 7:21, do not take to heart all the things that people say, lest you hear your servant cursing you. Your heart knows that many times you yourself have cursed others. It just kind of goes back to that idea of that I'd said earlier, that those things that offend us or that we allow to offend us. And I will say this, there are things to be offended about. Sin is a good thing to get offended about, okay? I'm not saying necessarily that being offended is the problem. It's when you hold the grudge. That's the problem. That's my point, okay? And so Ecclesiastes here, Solomon reminds us, don't take it to heart all these things that people say. Because when people get worked up and acted up and they become emotional and things just start getting said, yep, sometimes it goes too far. Sometimes it goes too far. I remember, it's been several years ago, you know, as a public school educator, We get roasted a lot on public media, Facebook. It's one of the reasons I just avoid a lot of that stuff. But it's, a parent reaches out to me to address something, and maybe they don't get the answer that they want, and then all of a sudden there's a little chit chat on Facebook about how terrible of a person I am. This happens all the time. Well, there was one incident where one of our mothers, and I'll be trying to be real careful here not to say any names, but she said something terrible about me. Just terrible. And I was really shocked and surprised by it. I really was. So I called her up. Now, again, I got to be careful not to say her name. But I said, hey, so-and-so, hey, how you doing? I mean, that's the kind of relationship we had. As soon as I called, she knew who I was, and, we were connected. Had several of her children in my school, and I said, hey, I came across something that was posted on Facebook, and I'm not on Facebook, so if I'm hearing something on Facebook, it's because somebody else has come to me and said, oh my, did you see this? And that's exactly what happened. I said, yeah, somebody shared with me that this was said by name, her name. And I said, you're the only name, her name, person with that name, her name, that I know. Oh, okay. Did you follow all that? And she said, oh, okay. She said, well, what was it? I said, well, let me just read it to you. So I read it word for word. And there was a naughty word in there, so I won't repeat it. Absolute silence. Absolute silence. And I just waited. Sometimes the best way to handle a conversation, when you're having those moments and it's silent and we want to fill the silence, sometimes the best thing is to not fill the silence. We call it letting the silence do the heavy lifting. So I was letting the silence do the heavy lifting. I said nothing. And I got confirmed what I believed was true. And she finally spoke and admitted, yep. And then I didn't say anything. I said, all right, thank you. Click, and hung up. Later that day, I did get an apology in an email. And I felt better about it. I really did. Although now I wish I would have thought, well, since you said that disgusting thing about me on Facebook, why don't you post that apology on Facebook? Well, of course, that didn't happen. And I wasn't smart enough to think about it in the moment. Otherwise, I certainly would have said it. But, I felt good about that. I let her know that it was a problem and let it go. And honestly, I never had any problem with her, except the next day we had a meeting, and she and I were the first ones to the meeting, sitting in this room all alone by ourselves. Honestly, I was quite tickled with the situation because I knew how uncomfortable she was. And I really wasn't, because I had addressed it, and, it was fine. I made my point to let her know, you know what? That hurt. That wasn't appropriate. And we go on from there. Anyways, talk too long about that. But we have a better model, don't we? If you just consider Matthew 27, which is a great long chapter that just gives us the story of the crucifixion. Think about all the terrible wrongs that were done to Jesus in that. The mock trials, the beatings, the floggings, the lying, the torture, us on and on. We know those things. We know that story. We know how terrible it was. But this was his response. Well, let me make this point. If anybody had the right to hold a grudge, wouldn't it be Jesus? But that's a ridiculous statement to make. If anybody had the right. I don't think that's an appropriate statement. Nobody has the right to hold a grudge. It's not biblical. It's not what God directs us to do, to think, to behave. But instead of holding a grudge, what did he do? He prayed. Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. I think that's an important thing to remember too. When people do stupid things or say stupid things to us, maybe that's the attitude we should have. Big idiot, you don't know what you're doing. Oh, nope, got to get over that. They don't understand. They don't know what they're doing. How appropriate is to hold somebody accountable when they don't really understand what they're saying or the repercussions that could come about from what they're saying. Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they do. Like I said, we have that better model from Leviticus 19:18. You shall not take vengeance or bear a grudge against the sons of your own people, but you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Simply why? Because I said so. I am the Lord. That's why. Because nothing good comes out of holding a grudge. Nothing. Consider how Jesus responded to Peter after Peter had denied him 3 times. Again, another time we might say, well, if anybody had a reason to hold a grudge or to be angry, and we know Jesus got angry. And I'm sure this was an incredible hurt for him. You know, when we talk about the friends of Jesus, these were real friends, real connections, real bonds. Somebody he was really close to. And to do what he did had to be devastating. But what does Jesus do with this? Maybe it was kind of like the call that I made to that mother who said those nasty things about me. Just want to make you aware and go on. But with Jesus and Peter, it was so much more than that. I mean, did Jesus hold Peter accountable? It's in John 21 if you want to revisit that again. Did Jesus hold Peter accountable? Absolutely. Did he just ignore what Peter had done? Absolutely not. Instead, he used it to motivate him. And I think that's exactly what made Peter, the Peter we love to read and hear about in our New Testaments. Our emotions and actions, when not characterized by love, do not and should not be dictated by the sinful acts of others. This is another way to think about that. If you're struggling with unforgiveness, if you're struggling with holding a grudge, if you have a problem with another person, it's not their problem, it's your problem. And you are not following the teachings of our Lord. And so doing that. That's got to weigh heavy on you. That's got to weigh heavy on you if you're going to change it. You know, I have to think about myself again. I struggled with my relationship with my father for a long time. And during all of this time, I was standing behind a pulpit every Sunday morning. The difference between this day and this day, where I forgave him here, was all of a sudden, it started weighing heavy on me when I realized what was at risk for me. And I knew it had to change. So if you're dealing with holding a grudge, where are you at in that? You know, sometimes we're perfectly willing to just go on holding a grudge. The problem is probably because we're not thinking about those consequences that it could bring to our own lives. So we have a choice. Holding a grudge. Holding a grudge is letting Satan steal your joy. Pam Jackson was her name, the young girl, good friend of ours way back when I was still in college down at Abilene, made a statement one time. I don't even remember the context anymore, but we were talking about something, and she says to us, Kathy and I, don't let Satan steal your joy. That really resonated with me. Don't let Satan steal your joy. Again, it reminds us there's a choice here. And when we have a choice, we are in control. So are you letting Satan steal any of your joy in life? If you're struggling with forgiving somebody that's hurt you, or if you're holding a grudge, then yes is the answer to that question. Satan is stealing your joy, and you're letting him. You're letting him. The power behind that statement is you can change it. You can do something about it. So what might you do? Romans 14:19 says, so then let us pursue what makes for peace and for mutual upbuilding. Also from the book of Romans 12:21, do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Forgiving is good. Letting go of the grudge is good. And even if you don't feel it, acting like what God wants you to be is good. The feelings will catch up. They will. How many of you let go of your grudge during this lesson? All right. It's pretty simple advice. If you're holding a grudge, just let go. Just let go. I know that sounds like an oversimplification, but it's where you start. You let go. Now today, if you're here and you need help letting go, bring up that claw grip you have on that grudge, and I'll get all the elders up here, and we will pry your fingers off that grudge to help you let it go. I'll hold you, and the elders will pry on fingers. We'll get through this. If there's something we can help you let go today, won't you come? Well, together we stand and sing this song of encouragement.